Okay, we'll talk about happiness, but let's just see what the cat is doing. So the cat is just in great form. Look at this. He is, in fact, the sun in this situation. So great. Look at this just ridiculous human. What a waste of space. So great. All right. So that's actual happiness. So let's see, let's like destroy it by studying it, which is usually the best way to do it. So I talked about past efforts, thousands of years, framing things and then trying to measure stuff and so on. The real-time things, right? Poking people with a stick. Are you happy? Bzz. Are you happy? Bzz. How about now? And that's fine. And it was a little invasive. For those of you who weren't here on Tuesday, very quickly, this was the last one I pointed to. It was published in Science, pretty interesting study. Basically, you had to answer, you had to say what you were doing. It's on an iPhone. It would go beep. And I guess they did it in waking hours. So they didn't wake you up in the middle of the night and ask you what you were doing and how your mind, what mental state you had. So this is an interesting thing. But it was a good spread. So this is happiness, right, this way. So, you know, if you were asleep and it woke you up, you were least happy. And then, of course, there was this funny little outlier at the bottom. But the point was, you know, it's good to be in a flow state. Fine. All right, so I've been trying to fix this thing up. So we want to build this hedonometer thing, and we'll make it a word, because we like to make up words. So we have hedonometer.org. First thing you do, right, when you come up with something is register the website and the Twitter handle. So we have storywrangler.org now. So we want these things to happen. We want it to be this remote sensing kind of thing, right? Because this is how you make a science take off, right? It's you've got to have all the like looking at rocks and so on, but it's great to have satellites, you know, or sonar things that tell you what's going on a long way below you because you can only dig so far. So we need this. We're going to have to get to this, and obviously this can be used for good or bad, but we're trying to help society. We're trying to build something that we add to the dashboard of society. That's the idea, right? So you're flying a plane, you want a lot of instruments in front of you. You don't want one that just says, flying okay, not okay. That would be a bad instrument just by itself, right? One number. So you have lots of numbers if you're flying a plane. I guess that gets a little, you have to be careful with that analogy because it's not like we're controlling society like a plane. We're all flying the plane, but we all want information, right? Wow, that's not, yeah. Anyway, so we'd like to see GDP. It's good, right? But it's good to see how are people, you know, feeling good. You know, what's the spread of wealth? You know, all these things. Like, you need a lot of measures in front of you, and you see people routinely cherry pick whatever makes sense for them. So this would, and this is something. If you, as we said before, with you know, the famous quote from Lord Kelvin, if you you have to be able to measure things to make them better. I think it's certainly been borne out over and over again, right? The things we measure, we tend to be able to focus on, and we can put it in front of politicians and engineers and whatever. So we need it to be transparent in how, this is important to me, like we need this to be not a black box, right? And there are any number of black box things out there associated with social phenomena, and certainly for sentiment detection or measurement, yes, black boxes are rampant. We'd like to make it transparent because we're simple-minded people. We want to understand how this thing is working. So we need it to be fast because of the volume of data that's around there. And this is certainly initially true. We wanted it to be based on written expression because there was so much text that was emerging onto the web from all sorts of sources. We want to have humans in the loop, right? We need people to evaluate things. I think I mentioned this the other day, right? Google mentioned, apparently is starting an initiative where they are going to try to connect Wikipedia to videos, right? So that there'll be some, you know, editors, right? People actually looking at things and evaluating things so that they don't have 90% of their fronted videos about something being conspiracy theory ones, right? Because people have figured out how to game it, yeah. So we want human evaluation there. Non-reactive means that we're not poking you with a stick, right? We're going to watch you, which is not creepy at all, but it's only the stuff that you say in public, right? That you tweet out loud. The self-reported stuff we talked about, which is incredibly important. You have to keep doing it. It has its own problems in terms of how people answer. Right? There's a big thing about the census now, for example, changing the census so that you'll be asked, there aren't many questions on the census. It used to be long form, like how many gerbils do you have in your house? They took that away, which is disappointing for the gerbil community. But so now it's like only about 10 things, and they want to add, are you a citizen? Which actually for me is a no. So I realized as I was listening to this. So of course that's very controversial, right? In the joyful climate we have right now. And people will misreport. They won't answer the thing, they'll run away. People come to the house, right? If you don't send the thing back, then someone will come to you, a census person will come to you and ask you, are you a citizen? You know, are you a citizen? Difficult question to ask. And we want it to be improvable. And I'll show you, this has been a really interesting part of this, that we've been able to improve the instrument we made, which again is a very simple thing, in ways that we didn't predict, right? And it's to do with language, certain structure of language, which we'll get to later on. And that's in, I guess, yeah, it's in this section, the Pollyanna principle, which is the idea that, or this observation, that there are more positive words than negative words in a very beautiful kind of way. It doesn't mean that they're more or less salient, they just are more, and it's to do with us being social beings. Okay, so here's the problem, right, that we have this sort of thing, and this is, I mean, these were good books to write at the time, right? That we're watching everything, and of course you end up with this policy if you only worry about happiness, right? Everyone gets some soma, and, or I guess marijuana is taking off, right? So maybe we're there. TV. It's arguable we're certainly in this situation already. So, okay, we're mindful of that. Facebook, which is evil and bad and all those sorts of things. This is funny, I'd forgotten about this slide. I sort of dug it out of some old things. They've been trying to do, they've been trying to do all sorts of things over the years, right? And this is back in 2008. They had a little sentiment detecting thing, and they were trying to, I mean, we've actually talked with them at times about trying to get our stuff there in useful ways. Incredibly, they're actually worried about how they come off in, I don't know, strange place. So this is an old one. What I'm going to say about this is very weird, and this was, if I talk about the emotional contagion stuff at some point, which is a Facebook disaster. So here was a problem with this, is that the sentiments were classified as just positive or negative, right? You just get plus or minus. So these two statements, and this is old, right? So of course it has this connection. But these two things are +1, right? You just sort of say they're +1. People do really bad things as well, where they'll take a sentence and maybe they just have in their lexicon of scores, they have this word, so they just score this whole sentence with whatever that word is, which is pretty weird. So famously in natural language processing, NLP, black boxes or not, it's just very hard. And I'm going to say impossible to evaluate like there are many sentences for which you cannot intuit the meaning completely, because if it's just written, it's just an English sentence, there's no stress, 5 or 6 words, nothing's in bold or anything, no emojis, right? Just words. And I guess I should have got the example. There's a famous example where, depending on which word you stress, you can get, a different meaning every time. And that's just stressing one word. If you stressed 2 of the words, you get another thing. So combinatorially, it's very. If you yelled the whole thing, that would be another thing. So I need to find that. So maybe emojis will help us stress of words, but it just remains that you need context, especially in English, because we've sort of jettisoned a lot of structure, because we've realized collectively that we don't need our verb's conjugation to indicate that it's talking about a pig and a fence and it jumped, right? Those other words can be, as you hear the sentence or you hear someone talking, you just need jumped, right? You don't need some weird little thing at the end that connotes gender also. There's all sorts of old archaic structures that we had floating around that we've thrown away. It was like, well, Anyway, so what I'm trying to say with all that is that sentences by themselves are very, 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 very hard things to analyze.